Hey guys, for today's video, I'll be going over Dan Heng Permansor Terrae's kits, relics, ornaments, teams, and eidolons to show you how to reach his full potential. Starting off with this kit, it seems like Dan Heng is going to be a really good shielder that also does really good amounts of sub DPS, on par with Hyacinth. His skill designates one ally target as the bondmate and provides all allies with a shield that can offset damage equal to 20% of Dan Heng's attack plus 400 for 3 turns. So, right off the bat, it seems like Dan Heng is going to be a fairly unique preservation character, which isn't too insane since there's only like 6 of them to begin with, but still, he's going to be a unique preservation character because the shields he provides scale off of attack rather than defense, which can be pretty bad since this means that most preservation Lightcones, aka Lightcones that pretty much exclusively provide defense, won't be able to synergize too well with him, and his signature Lightcone, which provides a ton of attack, won't be able to synergize too well with other preservation characters. But it can also be pretty good, since this means that his sub DPS, sustaining, and buffs all scale off of a pretty commonly abundant stats, which means that he'll synergize with a lot of characters. Anyways, his skill also states that the shield effect from Dan Heng's shield can stack but will not exceed 300% of the shield provided by the current skill, and the bondmate effect only applies to the most recent target of Dan Heng's skill. Now, before going into his ultimate, I'd like to go into his talent first, since it gives a bit of context as to what his ultimate actually does. For his talent, it states that when an ally character becomes a bondmate, Dan Heng summons Soul Dragon with an initial speed of 165. The Soul Dragon is then considered as the bondmate's summon, meaning that the bondmate could utilize the banana amusement set and receive other benefits from having a summon. But the Soul Dragon is only considered as a summon, not a memo sprite, meaning that neither Dan Heng, the bondmate, nor the summon will receive any buffs from any description that mentions memo sprite buffs, like the Arcadia set. Anyways, it also states that when Soul Dragon takes action, dispels one debuff from all allies and provides a shield that has the same properties as the skill and ultimate shields. But it's slightly worse, since this time it only provides half of the skill and ultimate shield effect. Regardless, what's really nice here is the debuff dispel, since it'll synergize really well with the Soul Dragon's ability to do a ton of actions. It also states that the Soul Dragon disappears when Dan Heng or the bondmate is knocked down, which is a pretty common trait for any summon. Now, for his ultimate, it states that it deals physical damage equal to 300% of Dan Heng's attack to all enemies, and provides a shield with the same properties as his skill's shield, which is decent damage and only a decent shield amount, considering it's the same as his skill's shield amount, even though this is his ultimate. It also states that Soul Dragon becomes enhanced for 2 Soul Dragon actions, and when Soul Dragon takes action, it triggers a follow-up attack that deals physical damage equal to 80% of Dan Heng's attack, and additional damage of the bondmate's type equal to 80% of the bondmate's attack to all enemies. Now, this part of his ultimate is a bit conditional, since the additional damage the Soul Dragon does heavily depends on who the bondmate is. The Soul Dragon does a follow-up attack based on Dan Heng's attack, which is decent, and then it does additional damage, which doesn't reduce toughness by the way, and it's based on the bondmate's attack, which is really powerful if you're using someone like Feinen, since Feinen gets a massive buff to his attack in his departed states. But if you're using Dan Heng with pretty much anyone else, like an HP scaling character, well then now his additional damage is horrible, so his team comps will favor characters that have a ton of attack, or characters that synergize really well with Ceridra, like Feinen and Anaxa. For his traces, his first trace states that when using his skill, increases the attack of the bondmate target by 15% of Dan Heng's attack, which is nice because Dan Heng will have a ton of attack to provide to his bondmates, and because this attack increase will also increase the Soul Dragon's additional damage because it derives from the bondmate's attack. For his other trace, it states that at the start of battle, Dan Heng's action advances by 40%, which will be good for quickly setting up his shields. Also, when the bondmate uses an attack, Dan Heng regenerates 6 energy and advances Soul Dragon's action by 15%, which is really good for Dan Heng's sub DPS, sustaining, and ultimate uptime, and will synergize really well with characters that can do a lot of actions, like Anaxa. For the other trace, it states that when Soul Dragon takes action, additionally provides a shield with the same properties as the other shields, except this time it only provides 25% of the skill and ultimate's shield. Also, when enhanced Soul Dragon takes action, further deals 1 instance of additional damage of the bondmate's bondmate's type equal to 40% of the bondmate's attack to one enemy target with the highest current HP, which is just a little bit more sub DPS that derives from the bondmate's attack. For his stats, he's gonna want minimum 3000 attack for his shields and sub DPS, a standard 134 speed, or if you can, 160 plus speed to generate a ton of skill points and or recharge his ultimate. Then just get your typical 1 to 2 crit rate to crit damage ratio. For his relics, the Sacerdo set is going to be really good since it provides 6% speed and up to 36% crit damage to the carry. But even though the set typically outperforms other sets, it doesn't contribute much to Dan Heng's shields. Thus, if you want a more balanced set that contributes to Dan Heng's shields and that carries his DPS, well then the new Recluse set is going to be ideal, since it increases his shield effect by 22% and it increases the carry's crit damage by 15%. For an alternative set, you can use any mixture of 2-piece bonuses that provide shield effect, attack, or speed. For his ornaments, he's gonna want the Lushaka set, since it provides him with 6% ERR, which he really wants in Feinen teams, and 12% attack to the carry, which will allow the Soul Dragon to do more additional damage. For an alternative, the Broken Kill set would be good as a general rule of thumb, since it helps against debuffs and provides a nice 10% crit damage boost for all allies. For an alternative set, the Panconi set would be good with physical DPS, aka Feinen, since it also provides 6% ERR and 10% damage dealt for other physical DPS. For his main stats, he's gonna want attack percentage for his chest, boots, sphere, and rope, but speed for his boots would also be good, and ERR for his rope would be ideal for Feinen teams. For his substats, prioritize getting attack percentage, then speed, then crits. For his Lightcones, his signature will be his best, since it provides 64% attack, heals the lowest HP having ally, and it provides up to 36% damage dealt to the bondmates and 24% damage dealt to all other allies. For an alternative, the new Preservation Battle Pass Lightcone would be good because it has 12 to 24% shield strength depending on its superimposition, and 12 to 20% damage dealt for all allies depending on its superimposition. For another alternative, On the Path of an Eon would unironically be good because it has a high base attack. For another alternative, the Texture of Memory's Lightcone would be decent since it provides 24% damage reduction to the wearer and 16% effect rest, which is nice if you're utilizing the Broken Kill sets. For his teams, like I've stated prior, he'll synergize really well with characters that have a lot of attack, like dot characters, and characters that synergize with supports that provide a ton of attack, like Feinen and Anaxa with Ceridra, because a good portion of his sub DPS derives from his bondmate's attack. For dot characters, considering that you'll typically be running both Kafka and Hysilence, since they both play an integral role at making dot actually usable, this means that you'll have two really good characters that can benefit from being designated as the bondmates. If you designate Kafka as the bondmates, well then you get more shields and more ultimate for Dan Heng, since she'll typically be built with hyper speed, which is really good for his energy regeneration and Soul Dragon's advance forwards. But if you designate Hysilence as the bondmates, Hysilence will benefit a lot more from Dan Heng's attack boost, considering that she's the main DPS. So whether you want to designate Kafka or Hysilence as the bondmates can be up to what your specific team needs. But typically you'll want to designate Hysilence as the bondmates, since the attack boost from Dan Heng given to Hysilence will typically outperform better than the shields and ultimates that Kafka's speed can provide for Dan Heng. Also, if you're going to use Dan Heng in dot teams, you're better off replacing his ERR rope with an EHR one so that you can get him up to 75% EHR and get the 100% attack boost from Kafka, which will be massive for his shields, sub DPS, and Hysilence DPS. For Feinen, Dan Heng will be able to provide Feinen with even more attack and one core flame every time he gives Feinen a shield. Not only that, but Feinen's departed state increases his attack by a massive amount, and so does Ceridra, which will result in the Soul Dragon dealing a lot more additional damage with Feinen and Ceridra than it would with other characters. Now, because Feinen doesn't allow other allies to do actions in his departed states, this means that Dan Heng won't be able to do enough actions to recharge enough energy for his ultimate once Feinen leaves his departed states. So if you're going to use Dan Heng with Feinen, you're better off using an ERR rope rather than an attack rope. For Anaxa, Dan Heng will be able to generate a ton of energy and do a lot more sub DPS damage every time Anaxa does his multiple skills, since every time the bondmate does an action, Dan Heng gains 6 energy and his Soul Dragon is advanced forward by 15%. shields. And if Anaxa is being ran with Ceridra, then Dan Heng's sub DPS will benefit from the massive attack increase Ceridra provides to Anaxa, and Dan Heng will be able to gain more energy and Soul Dragon actions since Ceridra allows Anaxa to do even more actions. For his Eidolons, his E1 states that when Dan Heng uses his ultimate, recovers 1 skill point for the team and increases the bondmates' all-type breastpan by 18% for 3 turns, which is really good since this will allow Dan Heng to generate a ton of skill points, especially if the bondmates in him are really fast. And then the all-type breastpan is decent, but it isn't too substantial. Regardless, this Eidolon will typically result in around a 6% increase to his performance. For his E2, it states that additionally increases the number of ultimate enhancements by 2 times, which is straight up a 200% increase to his sub DPS, since this will allow the Soul Dragon to do twice as many attacks. Also, after Dan Heng uses his ultimate, Soul Dragon's action advances by 100%, which is nice for sustaining because it'll allow you to quickly put up a shield if you have to. And when the enhanced Soul Dragon takes action, the additional damage dealt by the bondmates is 200% of the original damage, and the shield effect it provides in this instance is 200% of the original shield effect, which is another 200% increase to his sub DPS, and now a 200% increase to his shields as well. Thus, this Eidolon is yet another really valuable E2 that'll increase his performance by around 16% as well. For his E4, it states that the damage taken by the bondmate is reduced by 20%, which is another very mediocre E4, so I would only recommend getting it if you're going for his E6. For his E6, it states that when there is a bondmate on the field, increases the damage received by all allies by 20%, which is really nice since this is practically permanent. Also, when the bondmate deals damage, ignores 12% of the enemy target's defense, and when Dan Heng uses his ultimate, the bondmates would deal additional damage of their corresponding type to all enemies equal to 330% of the bondmate's attack, which is a really bad amount of defense shred that will only really synergize well with Sundace's E1, since Sundace's E1 already provides a ton of defense shred, and the 330% of the bondmate's attack to all enemies is actually really powerful AoE sub DPS. For my investing recommendations, I would recommend going for his E2, then his S1, then his E1, meaning that if you can only vertically invest into one option, I would invest into his Lightcone since it increases his performance more than his E1, but if you can afford to invest into 2 options, I would recommend going for his E2 since it's a massive boost to his defensive and offensive capabilities. Now, considering that Dan Heng is going to be the free unit, whether you should summon on him really just means if you should vertically invest into him. He's going to be really powerful with Ceridra alongside Feinin or Anaxa, and in dot teams. Not only that, but his sustaining and sub DPS is on par with Hyacinth's sustaining and sub DPS, meaning that you can practically slot him into any team and outperform the majority of other sustainers as long as that team isn't an HP scaling team. But he does all of this at E0 S0, and his feasible vertical investment options, aka E2 S1, only provide him with around a 45% increase to his performance, which is really bad in comparison to something like the Herdes' E2, which increases her performance by 63%. Thus, I wouldn't recommend vertically investing into him since he's already really powerful at E0 S0, and his performance doesn't increase from vertical investments as much as other units. Anyways, that's all I've got for today. If you've enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe. I would greatly appreciate it. Goodbye.